Over the last year of traveling, one thing has followed me around almost everywhere I've gone: the street animals that I've met all over the world. Dogs wandering the streets looking for food, cats slowly approaching strangers hoping they might be kind, animals that seemed both hungry for food and attention. And after seeing it again and again and again in different countries, I started feeling really pulled towards rescue work. But first, I wanted to understand what this life actually looks like beyond the cute videos posted online. So I started specifically looking for volunteer opportunities where I could get real experience helping at an animal shelter. And that's how I ended up in Cusco, Peru, volunteering at Colitas and Techo through Worldpackers. What I didn't expect was how much this shelter depends on one person, Felicia, the shelter owner. Nearly 40 dogs, 11 cats, medical issues, food prep, repairs, volunteers constantly rotating in and out, and every day she somehow keeps the shelter functioning while still making sure the animals are cared for and genuinely loved. One person dedicating her entire life around giving animals a safer and happier one. So in this video, I want to show you what volunteering here is actually like, introduce you to some of the animals, and share more about the incredible woman who built this shelter from the ground up after rescuing a mother dog and her puppies from being buried alive. I'll come back to that story in a minute, because first I want to start with the volunteer experience itself. I found this opportunity through Worldpackers. If you haven't heard of it, it's a platform where you exchange volunteer work for accommodations. They have opportunities all over the world at hostels, farms, eco-lodges, animal rescues, all kinds of things. And I specifically wanted something with rescue animals, partly because I'm feeling really drawn towards rescue work lately, and partly because I've really missed having animals in my daily life after losing my cats in 2024. So I started searching through different animal rescue opportunities on the site and eventually found Colitas and Techo, which translates to Little Tails Without a Roof. The reviews were amazing, and the photos showed volunteers walking dogs, feeding them, and helping around the shelter. It felt like the exact experience I was looking for. The process itself was super easy. I joined Worldpackers and applied through the app. Then I messaged with Felicia there and confirmed everything pretty quickly. And one thing I really like about Worldpackers is that it lets you message people who have volunteered there before. So I actually reached out to somebody beforehand and asked a bunch of questions about the experience. And they told me everything in the rave reviews was true. The volunteers stay in an apartment in Cusco with 2 bedrooms, both very spacious and nice. One has a king bed and a bathroom inside the room, and the other has a queen bed with another bathroom outside of the room. There are also 2 additional bedrooms in Felicia's apartment if there are extra volunteers. There's hot water, laundry, Wi-Fi, and 2 meals a day, and usually leftovers for dinner too. Considering everything that's included, the price is really affordable. It's only 23 euros a day, and that money helps support the shelter directly since there's no government funding helping run the place, and there are constantly expenses coming up. While I was here, there were generator issues, water problems, repairs needed around the shelter, and a bunch of updates being made to the cat room for extra security. Previously, the dogs managed to get in one time, and after that happened, Felicia immediately started figuring out ways to make the room safer. She found wire mesh for the windows, had me install a camera in the room so she could check on the cats remotely, added a new lock on the door, and started reinforcing different areas. There's always something that needs fixing, replacing, cleaning, organizing, or paying for. So the volunteer fees really do matter here beyond just covering accommodation. Morning started at 8:30 with breakfast, and then we head to the shelter around 9:20. It takes around 20 to 30 minutes to get there because there's a lot to do along the way. First, we round up the dogs staying at the apartment and get everybody on leashes. Felicia and I each take around 3 or 4 dogs, plus we're carrying huge containers of water to refill empty canisters that she set up for street dogs around the town. Along the route, we also pick up a few neighborhood dogs that technically belong to families, but mostly spend their days roaming around outside or just aren't properly cared for. There's Canella and a Pookie who come sprinting down the street the moment they spot us. My first day, I actually was terrified of them because they came charging at us, playing, but I thought they were attacking each other and were about to attack us. Now they just make me laugh because they're basically just giant, goofy toddlers. And most recently, Teddy, a puppy who spends most of the day tied up in a garage without any sunlight. Felicia asked his family if she could start taking him with us to the shelter during the day and bring him back afterwards. The first morning we picked him up, she smiled and said, "Time for school." And that's kind of what the shelter becomes for some of these dogs. A place where they get to socialize and run around and play and get attention, eat proper meals and drink water, and just exist as dogs for a while. And then after all of that, we finally get to the shelter. Usually the work there lasts around 3 hours, so this isn't one of those volunteer programs where you're working all day every day. You still have plenty of time afterward to explore Cusco, work remotely, relax, or do whatever you want to do. Plus, you get 2 days off a week. But during those few hours at the shelter, the help really does make a difference. Some tasks repeat daily, like cleaning dog poo or feeding the animals, replenishing water, or cleaning the cat room. Other days there were special projects like repair work around the shelter, dog walks in the mountains, baths, cutting up vegetables for soup, or just helping with random situations that came up that day. And I think that's important for people considering this opportunity to understand. This isn't busy work made up to entertain volunteers. You aren't just hanging out with dogs. The work here actually matters. The volunteers are helping Felicia to keep the shelter functioning day after day. So you really should only come because you actually care about animals and want to contribute. Felicia mentioned she's had volunteers in the past who didn't really want to work, and after seeing how much she carries alone, I can't imagine treating an experience like this casually. So one tip I'd give future volunteers is to come in flexible and just be willing to jump in wherever's needed, because every day at the shelter looks a little different. Another thing future volunteers should definitely know is that Felicia only speaks Spanish. So I really recommend coming in with at least a very basic understanding of Spanish, or be willing to learn while you're here. You absolutely do not need to be fluent. My Spanish is far from perfect, but knowing basic words for cleaning supplies, food, animals, directions, and daily tasks helps a lot. You pick up things quickly though because you're constantly using them. My Spanish has improved a ton just from everyday conversations and shelter routines. And my last tip is to be prepared to get attached to the animals way faster than you expect, because after a few days they stop feeling like shelter dogs. You get to know them really quickly, their personalities, routines, little quirks, who wants attention all day, who's shy around new people, or who insists on climbing directly into your lap the second you sit down. And once that happens, it gets very hard not to care about them deeply. Bonbon has been at the shelter for 8 years. She's a big dog, but incredibly gentle. And if you start petting her, she'll tap you with her paw the second you stop because she wants you to keep going. There's Oreo, probably the friendliest dog at the shelter, who acts like every human he meets is his best friend. BB is a snuggler and just basically wants to fall asleep in somebody's arms at all times. If you sit down anywhere in the shelter, there's a very good chance either she or Oreo will try to climb into your lap. Yoda looks exactly like Yoda and makes me laugh every single day. And then there's Choupette, who loves sitting on the porch swing and is one of the sweetest dogs at the shelter. Some of the other dogs pick on her sometimes, and I've become very protective over her while being here. But I think one of the hardest parts emotionally for me has been realizing how clearly I can picture these animals in homes. I can completely imagine Bonbon curled up on someone's couch demanding nonstop pets. I can picture Oreo and BB becoming those dogs that follow their person everywhere and fall asleep beside them every night. I can see Choupette finally relaxing somewhere quieter where she doesn't have to feel stressed around the other dogs. But some of these dogs may stay here for years. Some might spend their entire lives at the shelter, especially the older dogs or the mixed breeds or the ones with health issues. Felicia told me that many people specifically want purebred dogs or puppies, so a lot of these animals get overlooked no matter how sweet they are. Then there are the cats. The cat room got me emotional almost immediately. When I first arrived, there were 3 cats, then 7, and then on my final day, it suddenly became 11. Earlier in the month, a nearby family had a very young cat who had already had 2 litters of kittens because they didn't want to pay to get her spayed. So Felicia organized for someone to take her to another town where free sterilizations were being offered. We kept her in the volunteer apartment laundry room for 2 nights while she recovered from surgery. Then we brought her and her 3 kittens to the shelter cat room. Then, just a week and a half later, on my last day in the shelter, 4 more kittens were found abandoned in the trash. And sadly, that's not uncommon here. When animals aren't sterilized, unwanted litters are often treated as disposable problems instead of living animals. So overnight, the cat room went from 7 cats to 11. The original 3 cats were Chaska, Milka, and Kiwi. Chaska was found hiding from dogs on the street, and now she's this fluffy, affectionate cat constantly headbutting people for attention. Since losing my cats, I haven't really been able to picture myself owning another one day. And then I met Chaska, and she completely stole my heart. And then there's Milka and Kiwi, who are a mama and a baby, and they are both really shy and mostly high. And that's what's so hard, is realizing that they would probably become completely different cats in a calm home environment. You can see these little moments where they want to trust people. I think that's one of the hardest parts about volunteering somewhere like this, is imagining the lives these animals could have, and knowing many of them probably never will. But for these animals, the shelter is still the safest and most cared for they've ever been, and they are lucky Felicia found them. The shelter started back in 2013. One morning, Felicia was walking her dogs near a cemetery in Cusco when she saw a man carrying a box and heard puppies crying inside. So she stopped him and she asked him what was in the box. And he told her a dog had just given birth to puppies, but nobody wanted them and he didn't know what else to do. So he was going to bury them alive. Felicia took the dogs home instead. At first, she kept the rescued animals in her apartment, and for a while that worked, but eventually the neighbors started complaining more and more about the barking. And eventually she was told that she couldn't keep them in the apartment anymore. So she moved them onto land her grandmother gave her, and at the time, there was basically nothing there. The shelter slowly got built piece by piece over the years as new problems came up and she found ways to solve them. First, roofs to keep the dogs dry from rain and safe from hail. Then cement flooring because the mud and flooding became too difficult to deal with. Eventually, electricity, running water, and later a second floor for the cats. Even now, you can tell the shelter grew out of necessity. Every area has a reason behind it. Every repair solves some problem that already happened before. And for years before the shelter had running water, Felicia carried water there every day herself, spending money on taxi rides that could have been used for food for the animals. She always did whatever she had to do to keep the animals cared for. One day I asked Felicia, what does she do when she gets sick? She looked at me a little sadly and said, I can't get sick. And after being here a while, I understand exactly what she meant. There's nobody covering for her, no rotating staff, no backup person suddenly taking over the 38 dogs, 11 cats, volunteers, food prep, medications, repairs, and emergencies. The shelter still has to function no matter what kind of day she's having. And while I was here, she actually did get sick. And it changed absolutely nothing about her routine. She still went to the shelter every morning. She still carried supplies. She still cooked for the dogs, still fed animals around town, because the animals still need care regardless. And there's so much thought behind her care too. Years ago, she mostly fed the dogs kibble because it was cheaper and easier. But after losing several dogs to kidney disease, a vet told her that the dry kibble could be contributing towards it. So now she cooks these giant pots of soup for the dogs instead. Chicken, rice, vegetables, tons of water for hydration. Then she alternates soup days with kibble days. And when you see the amount of soup she's making for nearly 40 dogs, you realize how much extra work she's choosing to take on for their health. Also, throughout the week, the dogs get a treat of watermelon, which completely transforms the shelter into chaos because the dogs suddenly start sprinting around, losing their minds over fruit. Watermelon days became one of my favorite parts of being here. One thing I noticed pretty quickly is that the work follows Felicia everywhere. On the walk home from the shelter, we stop at a locked garage where 4 tiny kittens live behind metal panels. Their mother was killed by a dog, and now they survive hidden inside this little space, terrified of people. Every day, Felicia reaches through the fencing to refill their food and water bowls. Without her, they probably wouldn't survive very long. Another animal that likely wouldn't have survived without Felicia is Chapu. Chapu lives nearby, and Felicia stopped every day to refill his water bowl and drop off some food. He's another one that technically has a family but isn't properly cared for. Recently, he was badly injured in a fight, and his wounds became severely infected because they weren't being treated. Felicia brought him home, and he stayed at the apartment while he healed, getting medicine, food, water, and actual care every single day. What struck me while being here is how often situations like this come up. Everyday moments where an animal needs care and somebody has to decide whether they're going to help or not. And Felicia always helps. I think before coming here, I underestimated how much work goes into running an animal rescue, beyond just rescuing the animals themselves. It's infrastructure, money, repairs, medical care, water, food, sterilization, vaccinations, and emotional exhaustion. Over and over and over again. And somehow, despite all of that, this shelter still feels full of warmth. And at the center of it is one woman somehow keeping everything moving forward. So if you've ever thought about volunteering abroad, I hope this gives you a more realistic idea of what an experience like this can actually look like. If you want to volunteer at the shelter, donate, or even just help share the animals, I'll leave all of the information in the description. And if you're interested in more affordable and meaningful ways to travel, check out this video next. Thanks for watching.